and that smell of like the burning gas, the burning rubber. I was like, this is just normal life for a 2-year-old Sting Ray Robb. I thought that that's what everyone experienced.
We don't learn a lot of good lessons from the highs. I learned more lessons from the failures and from the lows.
God, I want to see your glory in the highs and in the lows. And at that point, my prayer, I was in a low, and it was like the gates of heaven parted, and I saw the two cars go away from each other, and it's like the angelic choir goes. I went right through the middle.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are your host, Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's helped raise over $500 million and help elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question. What if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a unique and engaged audience that we call Liberty Spenders? Now, Liberty Spenders make up roughly 40% of the country. We've identified them, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values. You can learn more about that by reading our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free.
We're particularly excited about our guest today.
We are.
Yes, not only because he's a race car driver, but because he's a fellow Hoosier, right?
Woo-woo.
Living in Indianapolis right now. Sting Ray Robb is with us. I'm excited to introduce him, an IndyCar driver with Juncos Hollinger Racing in the number 77 Goodheart Freedom Service Dogs Chevrolet. Now, not born in Indy, we'll give him a pass.
We weren't either, so that's appropriate.
Hailing from Idaho, Stingray's name honors the Corvette Stingray, and his career reflects that same bold spirit. He dominated the 2020 Indy Pro 2000 Championship and survived a wild 109G crash in 2024, which maybe we do or don't want to talk about. That sounds scary. Off the track, he's a man of faith and a newlywed. We'll definitely get into that. From go-karts to IndyCar, Stingray's story is one of grit and speed. Stingray, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro, Kurt and Kristen. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're getting all kinds of cool points today. It's like, oh my goodness, a race car driver. We're up in our game here. We're very excited.
We are. Now, I from every once in a while, I have talked to a few people about you and what you're doing, Stingray. The first question I get is Stingray a nickname or your name? I'm sure you get asked this a lot. How did that all take place? What's the story behind Stingray?
Yeah, great question. I'm not surprised that's the first question to lead us off here. It's a great intro, as usual. It's always funny. Like I know how the story is going to go every single time. I shake someone's hand for the first time, meet them, and I'll share my name, and they're like, "What do you do?" I'm a race car driver. And what's your name? Stingray. And it's like, okay, this is all a lie. It's not true. And it's like, yeah, no, really, it is. But the story goes, my parents were big Corvette fans, as you mentioned. So they decided to name me after the Stingray Corvette. That's the more telling, more decisive part of my story. But the more boring side of the story, which is kind of fitting because I just got back from a trip to the UK. But my dad's side of the family's heritage is from Stirlingshire, Scotland. So Stirling was shortened to Sting, and both my grandfathers had Ray in their name. So I got to spend some time at Stirling Castle recently, which was really cool. It's like Sting in the Stirling Castle, kind of a little bit of play on that. But I don't like to tell that part as much just because, being a race car driver, it's much easier to say, hey, I drive for Team Chevy now, named after the Corvette. The branding takes care of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some parents, what they say, they kind of live out their fantasies in their kids. So my first thought was, well, man, must have been a lot of pressure on you to race cars, or maybe not. You took to it pretty quickly.
Yeah, there was not a lot of pressure early on. I think I put the pressure on my family to get me inside the race car. From an early day, my passion became their passion. I mean, that's not to say that they didn't have a passion for cars in the first place, but I remember sitting in 2-year-old Stingray in my mom's or my dad's lap at Corvette club meetings and drag races and autocross events, and that smell of the burning gas, the burning rubber. I was like, this is just normal life for a 2-year-old Sting Ray Robb. I thought that that's what everyone experienced. That's not the case. But I remember growing up I asked my parents for a go-kart, and for my 5th birthday, they got one for me, and that was kind of the beginning of the end as far as they knew their own lives. My dad parked his drag car that he used to race. It, like, didn't get to run for, like, 15 years because I was doing the go-kart thing, but they loved it. I mean, they sacrificed a lot to get me to where I'm at today, and, I feel very blessed by that opportunity, but it's kinda funny because along the way, they'd be like, "Hey, you should go play basketball. You should go play baseball. We'll buy you all the golf clubs in the world. Like, do anything but racing." That's not true. But they definitely gave me some opportunities to try other things. I got to be a kid while living out the dream in many aspects. So they didn't put a lot of pressure on me. They wanted me to have fun and enjoy it for what it was, and it just turned out God gave me the talent at the right times and the right backing at the right times to be able to push the limits to get to where I'm at today.
I love that, and it is interesting how those early influences can guide. Um, our son is just turning 3, Gideon, and I was just thinking, "Okay, I wanna get him some outdoor toys," and it's like, "Oh, if I get him T-ball set, is that gonna push him this way or basketball?" Or and then you think, "This is so silly." It's not in our hands anyway, but that's a beautiful story.
It is. And if he does follow his namesake, that won't be terrible, right?
That's
Uh,
right.
and we were talking about this just before you got on because I was trying to get Hunkos. How do I say that again? Hunkos
Juncos
Hollinger.
Hollinger Racing, yes. You
Yeah,
did
I
it
was
really
trying to
good the
get that
first time.
right.
I was
And
impressed.
yeah, and we'll do JHR from now on. But JHR is new to you again, new but old, right? You were with them before, and then you were with AJ Foyt. You're back. How is that kind of? How are each of the teams are a different vibe? This is part of racing I don't really know. I know who the drivers are. I don't know, really understand or fully appreciate the teams and how that all works. What's the vibe of it with when you switch teams? How does that whole thing work?
Yeah. As a Hoosier, I'm going to educate you here because it's some good information in being in your home state,
Yes.
the Indy 500 here, to know all this. But on my side of the story, Juncos has been a team that I've been with before. So you mentioned at the beginning of the show the 2020 Indy Pro 2000 championship that I ended up winning. Well, I won that championship with Juncos. And so
Yeah.
it was a different crew of guys, but Ricardo Juncos, the team owner, who's now partnered with Brad Hollinger for the IndyCar side, but at the time it was just him. He was running the team. His brother was my mechanic. He was the one bumping me into the car every race, and
Hmm.
that group of guys is what kind of helped form me into a championship-winning driver at that early stage. And then I kind of went on a different path. We kind of had a falling out back in 2021 as I moved up the ladder. I got the scholarship to move from that AA ladder into the AAA ladder, and then I switched teams to Andretti Autosport. And that season, I finished second in the championship. That got me recognized to go to IndyCar. And I've been with 3 teams in IndyCar now, returning back home to Juncos Hollinger Racing. But back to your point of what is the vibe change like? Anytime you change teams, there's new relationships to learn. You probably have experienced this in new jobs, new families. As you get married, you're like, okay, I got to relearn how to communicate with the in-laws. It's not my family, it's their family, but it's also my family, and you got to start over a little bit. And that's kind of been what's like this off season for me is I signed with Juncos Hollinger, but it's a new team to me. The logo's the same, but the team itself is a different crew of guys, different engineers, mechanics, anyone behind the scenes other than Ricardo Juncos himself are new to me. And so that group of guys I have to build a relationship with, build communication with, just like I would any other year. Now, switching from AJ Foyt Racing, and honestly, it's kind of funny because the two shops are less than a mile apart downtown Speedway. So if you're standing on the front step of AJ Foyt Racing shop, you can see the Juncos Hollinger Racing shop. So I didn't have very far to move, but the teams themselves are structured in very different ways. The reason for that is based on leadership or past experience. The team I'm with now in JHR, they have more of a European style structure, Formula One style structure. And that's because Dave O'Neill is one of our team leaders coming from the Formula One world. And so he kind of set it up with like the structure of you have him and then you have 2 main engineers underneath him and then you have more engineers underneath them. Where last year with the J Foyt, it was just Larry Foyt running the team and then everyone was kind of the same across the board. There was some decision makers in a group, but for the most part, it was one level. And so you didn't have that depth of authority that you might have now at JHR.
Yeah. Well, it's such a different world, and in terms of how these teams
Mhm.
work and how the behind the scenes racing
Mhm.
works, right? I mean, as a consumer of it, we see the we see the race, right? We think that's what racing is, and you see the year of preparation to get there. Um,
Well, and the teamwork involved,
yeah,
just like how you'd set up a business, do you want more of a flat structure? What's the hierarchy look like? So, all those similarities are there.
yeah. Um, I was we mentioned this in the intro, and it sound awfully scary, flipping your car during a race after a big crash, and I see those. That's another thing we see as people who watch and think that looks horrible.
Well, yeah,
Like,
people live
how do
these
people
crashes,
walk
and
out of that?
my heart is in my stomach, and all I'm doing is praying that everybody is okay.
Yeah,
It my nerves are
yeah.
maybe not as strong as some others, but I can't imagine.
Yeah, like the mental stamina to have a crash and then come back and still be bold enough to make the difficult passes and run the race at the speeds in which you race has to be a little bit of, I mean, there's certainly some faith involved in that, but a real mindset issue. How do you deal with a crash and coming back from that and feel that same kind of boldness you need to win a race?
Yeah, that crash was one of the craziest experiences of my life. Flying through the air at 150 plus miles an hour, and I remember the moment, and some lead up to that story as well. I've not had the best run in my IndyCar career. I've won races leading up to IndyCar. I've won championships. I've proven myself to be worthy of a seat in IndyCar racing as much as anyone could. And at this point in my career, I'm still developing as a young driver, and so I've had to put in some hard work and dedication and just get beat to a pulp race after race, right? And so part of that learning process is kind of been, how do I become spiritually, mentally, and physically prepared? Well, last year I was going through a little bit of spiritual preparation, I think, for this moment. And at the time leading up to this race, we had just come off the Indy 500 recently. I had one of my best results in IndyCar at the Indy 500, leading the third most laps of anyone on that day. And then we go to this track, Iowa, another oval, a few races later in the year, and I'd come off of a verse that I kind of experienced during the Indy 500, and it was coming from Exodus, and it was talking about Moses talking to God as if he was talking to a friend. And God asked Moses, and I'm paraphrasing here, so don't quote me on this. Don't say that I'm breaking heretical law here. This is not what I'm saying. You'll get the principle though. And so Moses is talking to God as if he was talking to a friend, and God says, "What can I do for you?" And Moses says, "Show me your glory." That was the request. And I read that and I was like, "All right, God, I want to see your glory in the highs and in the lows." And at that point in my prayer, I was in a low, and I just wanted to see God's glory in action. And we went into the Indy 500, had one of the best results, and that was like, "Okay, God, I see you in the highs." Like, that's great.
Yeah.
And I didn't really pray to have a low, but that crash happened at Iowa, and as I'm flipping through the air, I'm realizing, okay, I'm head level with the top of the catch fence. It's probably not a good thing. And I realized, I'm like, wait, hang on. No, the catch fence is above me. So that means that I'm upside down. And
Mm.
first thought is probably, all right, fear, right? I'm flipping through the air in an Indy car. This is not good. I should be afraid. And it was like time slowed down. And in the moment, I'm thinking of past drivers that have been in a similar situation where they got pierced by suspension. A piece of suspension goes through the tub into their leg, or big crash knocks them out for the rest of the year, concussion. I mean, like, all these scenarios are just spinning through my head. But my reaction to all those things that I was thinking about in that split second moment was not fear, it was peace. And I realized that the prayer was being answered as I'm flying through the air in the Indy car. I got to see God's glory in the lows. And when I made impact with the ground, it was 109 G's. And that measurement is through the accelerometers in my earpieces in my helmet. So that's how much pressure I felt through my head. It was 109 times the force of body on your, or force of gravity. And so I went flipping through on the ground, slid to a stop. I get like settled upside down, and I hear my spotter on the radio, safety crew's coming, and I look up, right, because I'm upside down, and I look down because I realize
Mm-hmm.
that's actually up, and
Mm-hmm.
I realize that the safety crew's there. They flip me back over, and I'm like, "Get me out of this thing." As I'm getting out of the
Right.
car, I reach up, and we have this metal halo that goes around our head to kind of protect it from impacts as it did, and it's made out of titanium. Well, when you use titanium on the top of a car that's sliding across the ground at 100 plus miles an hour, it tends to get hot. And I didn't think
Oh
about that.
my. Oh
So
no.
I grab it. I don't have my gloves
Yes.
on, and I go, oh, and I seared my finger. So my one wound from that whole accident was just a little blister on the tip of my index finger. And that one little burn was like the final grass on the camel's back. It was just like everything collapsed. I passed out. It was like that final jolt of adrenaline that I needed to just give
Mm.
up. And I remember I'm sitting there and I have the safety crew kind of holding me up. I'm on top of my car and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I can hear voices. I can't see anything. It's very bright. I think I'm passed out.
Right.
And so I told myself, I said, okay, when I come to, I'm going to tell these guys I'm not doing all right. So I kind of come to and I tell them I'm not doing all right. And they're like, yeah, we know. So they were very aware of the whole
You're
situation.
like
I
trying to
apparently
hold it
was not.
together. Okay, I think
Yes,
I need to communicate to them the seriousness of what is going on.
exactly. So I get life
Oh.
flighted out because I passed out after a huge impact. Um, and they do all the scans, all the tests, and I'm totally fine. The next day, I was
Mm.
playing pickleball back home in Indianapolis. You know, what better way to test your
The next
physical
day?
fitness? I was playing pickleball. I was totally fine. I mean, I had a couple of bumps on my kneecaps where they bounced around in the car, a couple of bumps on my elbows, and a burned finger. And that was like the extent of the damage. And again, it was like the prayer had been answered. I got to see God's glory in the highs and the lows of an accident. You know, the highs of flying through the air, but the lows of the emotional damage that came from that. But it was all it was a very cool experience, and so going back to your point of how do you have the boldness to go from an accident like that to back in the car the following race weekend and try and fight for a victory? It's because I had more peace in the failure than I even had in the success,
Mm.
and I think that that spoke more to what I had in my life as a foundation to work from than anything else, and so I was able to have that boldness because of the foundation that my life is built upon.
Mm. Wow. Well, I think that's a lesson we ought to park on for a little bit, because as you were talking about your prayer to God about show me your grace and the highs and the lows, I can picture myself doing that prayer and it would probably look a little bit like show me your grace in your highs, in the highs, but maybe the lows too, right? You know,
If there are any. I mean, we don't want any of those.
I,
But
so there's a lesson there about God's grace in both places, and then also the lesson of the boldness it gave you, right? Because you know, we've actually talked about it a lot just in our own lives here. Um, we don't learn a lot of good lessons from the highs, right? Because when we succeed, I tend to give myself more
yes.
credit than I'm due. I learn more lessons from the failures and from the lows, but I don't want to. I don't want to have it. Right.
Yeah.
So that's an important lesson. I think it's great that that's what you're saying. It increased your boldness going into the next race, knowing you were safe when when it, when it really went wrong.
Yeah, I think that that moment that I experienced there, it was kind of the realization of a bunch of different things, right? But uh, I still got beat to a pulp again, like I'm referring back to. I had some more failures left in the season to keep learning. It wasn't like I turned a corner and then there was great success waiting for me on the other side, but it strengthened something. And I think that this points me back to a verse that I had come to me because we haven't really gotten to the question of my faith yet, but as you can probably tell, I'm a believer and I have a pretty strong faith that's kind of poured into my career. But um, early on during that 2020 season, that championship again, I'm referring to that I won, um, I was one of the favorites to win that championship. And I hadn't won a race yet. And you need to win races to win championships. I'd finished on the podium, but I hadn't won yet. And we went to this one race and I finished not very good and I was frustrated and I ended up taking a knee out in this field because I was just giving up. I was like, God, I give up. I don't know what to do. I'm done. I'm either not good enough. I can't get it right. Someone runs in the back of me. A part falls off the car. The steering wheel. I mean, you name it. I'd had experienced it at some point in my career, my life, and I was tired. Honestly, tired. At 17, 18 years old, I was exhausted, and I remembered sitting there on a knee praying, and a memory verse came back to me from my homeschool days. My homeschool teacher from our church used to make me sit in her living room and memorize Bible verses till I was blue in the face. But one of those verses is perfectly fit for what we're talking about. And it was James 1. Now, James 1 says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance. So let perseverance finish its work so that it may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." And I've always said that racing's got the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And so if your foundation is not set on a verse that's similar to that, it's hard to go to work from that. Especially with a career that I've had where it has been the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. So getting to see God's glory in that was another way of praying for that opportunity to see that perseverance do its work, and prepare me for what my future might hold or might not hold. And I think that goes back to another verse, and I think it's Proverbs 16:9 that says, "Man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." And it's a matter of faith, right? When we're going through life in these moments, I'm not saying to put so much pressure on the passions or career that we have, but the calling is very clearly set out in God's word. We don't have to put that kind of pressure on our lives. But God has given this platform, this passion that I have. And so I can let it be impactful in my life and enjoy it for what it is and still choose to follow my faith in accordance with that.
Hmm.
Exactly.
And that was one of the questions I wanted to ask about that great championship season and talk about that a little bit more. What was, what's the story of that great the championship season, and what went well there? And, talk a little bit about that uh, season that helped elevate you into the IndyCar league.
Yeah. So that season, it was year 3 for me. So that was my 3rd year in that car. Second year with Humkos at the time. And I had continuity from the year before coming to that season, a car that was kind of developed around my driving style, what I needed, an engineer that I built communication with. And I'm actually trying to think. That I think was the only year that I've been with the team since being in a car where I had a repeat team. I've been with
Uh,
a new team every year in my car
Mm.
racing career. And so the one year that I got to stick with someone, I finally had it pay off in the long run, which was good. But um, like I said, I told you guys that story just a second ago of kind of that turning point in my mentality, my shift in my faith, and how that poured into my racing. Well, the turning corner was actually the next day, which is pretty cool. I was 49 races without a victory, go into the next day with that renewed mindset. But I told you about that prayer, and at the end of the prayer, I said, "All right, God, I'm going to show up tomorrow, but I also need you to show up." And it was a prayer of faith, but also of I need help.
right,
And so the next day, I was out on track. I was running in 3rd place actually, which was a good spot to be in. Not quite as good as first, but 3rd place is all right.
right.
And I remember watching the 2 cars in front of me, and they were battling it out wheel to wheel. And at the track we were at, there was a series of corners called Thunder Valley. Well, these 2 drivers were going through Thunder Valley. They were side by side, and all of a sudden they made contact, and it was like the gates of heaven parted. And I saw the
Mm.
2 cars go away from each other, and it's like the angelic choir goes. I went right through the middle. I ended up winning that race. This is the first win of my career in that car, and that would be the first of 7 on the season. Now, I think what really kind of came from that was the realization of I could win. And it wasn't
Yes.
the floodgates open that day. Like I still had other races I had to go into and remind myself of the confidence that I had from that faith, that step of faith, right? And the real turning point I think came later in the season at Indianapolis. We had a triple header weekend. I remember I was running in like 5th place, and somebody passed me when they weren't supposed to under a yellow flag. And in that moment, it like flipped a switch in me. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen here. I'm going to drive around you. So I just put my head down and I wasn't thinking. It was just, I think the term it's not flow state, but it's like relaxed focus.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
I started chasing him down, passed him in like 2 laps, and then I just went to the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy, and the next guy. And pretty soon I looked down in front of me and I was the only car left. And that would be the first win of that weekend that I would win all 3 races in. And that would again lead to those 7 championship victories that I had to lead to that championship win, that would eventually propel me on into IndyCar. So it was a many steps of faith, right? It was the obedience of that faith-filled moment, right, that allowed me to have the confidence to step into that opportunity to go for that win. And so those were several moments that I've experienced to get to that championship victory that I've seen repeated through my career, but they're hard to manufacture, right? It's hard to just do that, but that's a part of what we do. That's why I love racing because I get the opportunity to do what I love and also chase excellence.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, and for so many of us, people of faith, it's like we know that God's got this, and we don't know what that means, right? It doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to have the success that we want, because that may not be what ultimately serves. But it's amazing how having that confidence and belief, and yet still as humans, our flesh, sometimes we need that kind of proof, or that encouragement so we can believe in ourselves even beyond what we know God can do. I know I've seen it for ourselves of how I show up differently when I decide that this isn't up to me and I have, through his strength, through his power, I can do things. But even as someone who's been, a person of faith for a long time, it is true. Like the weakness of my flesh, where I often have more of that confidence after I have seen, right, some of that progress or some of that success, even though I shouldn't necessarily need that. But it's a real thing. And to be able to continue um, that confidence and that momentum without thinking, oh yeah, that was all me, right? I'm now confident because I've now done something, as opposed to, no, it's still him. Um, but I have now had a track record. I have reference points where I can go back to in my faith journey and say, no, this is why. I can go back and think of time and time again where this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. We know this. And so I love you expressing that in that example of how that helped you, while still knowing it isn't us, right? It's still not our own power and our own strength that propels us.
Yeah.
Hey, business owners, did you know there's 76.5 million faith-based and conservative consumers that are looking to support brands that align with their values?
That's a $5 trillion opportunity. And if you're not tapping into it, you're leaving money on the table. Our new book, Liberty Spenders, is your ultimate guide to reaching this influential audience using conviction-driven marketing.
That's right. We break down real-world strategies that successful brands are using right now to connect with this audience authentically, build trust, and drive long-term business growth.
So if you're truly serious about standing out in today's crowded market, grab your copy today on Amazon or visit libertyspenders.com. And don't miss out on this revolutionary strategy called conviction-driven marketing. You've had a big recent change, not just a new team change, but you recently got married. You're, almost 6 months in, 8 months.
Yeah, you probably know better than I do at this point, but it feels like a whirlwind of change in my life, but all for the better.
Yeah. So did you meet your now wife from racing? Is she into racing? How did that whole thing come together?
Well, uh, this is kind of an embarrassing story. So I will give you the
Love it.
condensed version.
Love it.
Um, it would be much better if she was here to tell it with me because she's a great storyteller. Molly is from the Indianapolis area. You guys probably would know her hometown, but I've been married into the Hoosier family, if you will. But the
Yeah.
way that we met is kind of unique, and I don't recommend this. So if there are any other young men watching this, do not take notes of this is what to do. This is a lesson in what not to do, because you will be arrested. Anyways, now with that point made, I moved to Indianapolis with my roommate at the time. He's also from Idaho. He's an engineer, and we moved here in April of 22 to really just commit to the dream, right? I was
Mhm.
in the category below IndyCar at that time. I was going to go to work out at the gym that was here. I work with the team at the shop that's based here. He was committing to being an engineer in IndyCar or a category similar to just to get the development done. And so when we moved out here, it was him and I and my dad. And my dad stayed in my bedroom on the floor next to my bed. Like that, it was chaos for a few months while we sorted out what our life was going to look like. But we didn't know anyone. I mean, we didn't have any friends, we didn't have any family. So any chance that we could to meet and greet with someone, we were, shaking hands, trying to be friendly. And he and I, my roommate and I, are both very active guys. So we'd go rock climbing. We go downtown is where we were living. So we were right near the canal. And so we'd go and we do runs on the canal. We go throw a frisbee around, you name it. We had met our other neighbors on one side of us that owned a dog. So we'd walk their dog back and forth every once in a while. But one day we were walking their dog and we're returning the dog home. And Stafford and I had been talking earlier in the day. He's like, "Hey, have you seen the cute neighbors next door?" It's like, "No, but I would like to." And he was wingmanning for me at the time because he was dating someone. And so he was just being a bro, if you will. And
Yeah.
anyways, we're walking the dog back and he goes, "Hey, that's them." And he points up the road, up the canal from where we are. And I can see they're walking away. I'm like, it would be really creepy right now if we went and ran up to them. Hindsight, it would probably been a much better option than what we did instead. So we didn't introduce ourselves at that time. We were waiting for the right opportunity. And, a couple weeks go by and their apartment was two doors down from us. And the way that our apartment complex was set up, we had to go outside and walk past their apartment to get just about anywhere. So walking to the grocery store, anywhere else downtown, we're walking right past their front door, past their window that opens up into their living room. Well, we're bright young men, Stafford, my roommate, and I, and so we notice things, right? This is me trying to not make this sound too creepy, but we had noticed that when it was after kind of like the workday, the 9 to 5, right? The blinds were open on their front window, and we could kind of see them milling around in there. We didn't like stare in the window by any means. We're just in passing, kind of like going, "Oh yeah, the window's open." Anyways, well, we figured out that during the workday the blinds were closed, so they're probably not home. So we just assumed, okay, blinds open, they're home. Blinds closed, they're not home. Again, this is a lesson in what not to do. You will be arrested.
Right.
So we decide one day to go over and knock on their door because we saw the blinds were open. And so we go over, Stafford takes lead, he knocks on the door, and nobody answers. So we wait a second. But we know that they're home because the blinds are open. So we go, "Bah,
Sure.
bah, bah,
Right.
bah," knock on the door super loud. And Molly, my now wife, opens the door and it's these two creepy guys with two fake names from a place that she's never heard of, right? Stingray and Stafford from Idaho. And they're here because they're two door down neighbors. Like, this is a total made up story. Like, this is not going well.
Right.
You can honestly tell the conversation didn't go well because the initial interactions are always interesting. So, we asked, "Hey, is your roommate home?" And she was not. So she's home alone with these two creepy guys in the front doorstep. Terrible interaction. So she ends up shutting the door, calling her roommate, and is like, "Hey, fair warning, I'm leaving tonight. Do you want me to like have you come stay with me at my parents' house that is up north? Like, I'm running away, kind of a deal." And she's like, "No, I'll just shut the blinds and lock all the doors and keep everyone away." So they're scared of us at this point. But lucky enough
Yeah.
for us, the family that had the dog on the other side of us reintroduced us one afternoon, and it was like an immediate reaction of like, okay, we're gonna be friends. Once her and her roommate came over, we started interacting. We saw like, okay, these are just two goofy dudes that don't know how to make a good intro, but they're pretty cool. And I remember it was the first week that we had known Molly. She invited us to go to her parents' house to go frog gigging. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever been frog gigging, but it is an experience. And as an outdoorsman from Idaho, I thought, okay, these girls are kind of probably like, they don't want to get their hands dirty. They don't want to get frog slime on them. No, they didn't care. They were in the mud, mucking around, catching frogs, and it was like the coolest thing ever. So, Molly and I, we got to be really good friends for about 8 months before we started dating. So I got to see her character, and that's what made me fall in love with her. She was someone that I loved who she was, not just the attraction side or anything like that. I got to experience who she was before the infatuation of our relationship together. So it was a really good experience to have that I think can now we're married and it worked out well and I'm not sitting in a jail cell for stalking someone.
These two creepers are here and they're banging on the door. What is going on? They're
Yes.
extremely eager.
That's all right. I wasn't particularly suave in my attempts with Kristen either. but sometimes our women save us from ourselves. And so
Amen.
we both have good ones. And I think that's actually an interesting caveat into, growing up in Idaho, you love outdoor stuff like skiing and rock climbing. So are you just attracted to the adrenaline of race car driving plus skiing and rock climbing? What's the connection there?
A great question. I don't even know. I like being active. Racing has just been my passion from day one. I feel like I had great genetics in that sense, where my parents just loved motorsports and they wanted to be a part of it, and they gave up everything. They sacrificed everything to get me to where I'm at today. I remember, this is kind of off topic, but even my grandparents, like they sold their dream Chevrolet Chevelle that they had, just to keep me in the car for a couple of races one year, and they haven't gotten it back since. So it's just like I've seen this kind of journey unfold
Mm.
before me of just their sacrifice, their belief in who I am. It wasn't just the backing, right? But it was the belief. Um, but the outdoor side was kind of involved with them as well. Going elk or deer hunting every off season, and uh, being in high school in Idaho. And one of my best friends, he had a dog and a truck and a boat and a shotgun, and so we'd go duck hunting, and that's just what we did. And
Right.
so I just like being active. I don't sit well still for very long, and so for me, being in Idaho was kind of like the dream, because on any given day during the spring, like today, for example, today would be a great example of what Idaho would be like. If you guys were with me in Boise, I'd be like, okay, there are several options for the day. Here they are. We could go snow skiing, mountain biking, golfing, boating, or we could just hang out and go indoor rock climbing. It's up to you guys. What would you like to do?
Yeah. Or we could
It's
just
just like
hang out, like chill and go rock climbing.
exactly,
I love it.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, what I heard in that whole answer was that thankfully they didn't name you after the Chevelle. Stingray, much better.
I
Uh,
agree. I agree.
yeah.
It worked out well.
And I've had a wonderful opportunity to meet your manager, who's a really neat person who I know you've known for a long time. Your mom, the mom manager, right?
Yeah.
Which is an interesting blending of family and what you're doing in racing. What's it like having her there, rooting for you, involved in the team?
It's very good, actually. You talk about someone that believes in who you are and what you're doing, and she's bought all into the mission that we're on. And that started from an early age. My mom's pretty scrappy. She's an entrepreneur of sorts, and growing up, my parents, they owned a grocery store together, and she would be the one kind of running the business behind the scenes. And this is coming from someone that had no grocery experience, right? So she's a trial by fire kind of a person. She loves projects. It just so happens that I've been her biggest project for her life. So this is her full-time job now as my momager. That's what I affectionately call her. But yeah, she gets stuff done. She's been a huge supporter, huge critic of mine at different times in my career. But I think that at any point you need someone that believes in you to be successful, right? You can't do this on
Mhm.
your own. It takes a village. And so it just so happens I have to work with my mother as part of that village, which is good and bad at times, but I'd say 99% good.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I've met her and I can speak to the force of nature
Mm.
personality
Yes.
there.
Great,
Um,
great example there. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you'd have to have be cut out for it, So outside of just the trust and rapport that you guys would have, there's a real skill set needed there. And so, what a blessing to have that within your family.
yeah, I'm excited that um, we've gotten here because we've covered a lot of topics and faith has come up multiple times on its own. And I wanted to make sure we got a chance to talk about that because from the first time we met, I really picked up on the fact that to some extent, racing isn't just about racing for you. There's something deeper in your motivation to be a race car driver and the ability to use that platform to do good in the world. And um, and so I know you've been open to talking about faith on this here with us, but also a lot of other places. How's that kind of your faith and racing? How has that kind of come together in a way that um, generates kind of satisfaction and integration into both things?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. It's fun being able to kind of share more than just my racing personality because racing is just a part of what I do. It's not who I am. And my philosophy is more than just a driver. Yeah, if all I do is win championships or races, which would be great, that would be awesome. That's like the dream, right? Is to be excellent at what we're doing, is to win. And if that's all I ever did, I'd be missing the point. I think the truth is that we're called for something bigger than just our success, right? We're supposed to have significance somehow. Now, that significance for me comes from my identity being tied to something bigger than the results. Well, in the results driven industry, what else is there, right? If I have a bad day, I'm gonna feel bad. If I'm in a good car on a good day, I'm gonna feel really good. But I can't do that, right? Like I have to be tied to something much firmer, much more foundational than that. And that's where my faith comes into play because my identity is tied to what Jesus Christ did on the cross and who he says that I am. And so my career, I think that I mistook for a long time as my calling. Now, that's not to say that it hasn't been a gifting, but I think I put too much pressure on my career as a calling, and it almost led to the destruction of my faith. Because what happened was in my mind, I'm going to do my best to explain this, but when racing was a calling, I almost would tell myself this: if you fail as a driver, your faith has failed. And when your faith has failed, you lose your foundation. And the truth is, this thought that I've had that I'm explaining to you guys came about recently by someone that asked me the question of, "Do you think God speaks to us now today?" And I said, "Yes." Immediately, I didn't think about it. I just like natural reaction. Yes, clearly through His Word. And in that response, I realized I'm like, "Oh my goodness, like I've been lying to myself this whole time, right?" Like I was like putting this calling on myself. And it's not to say that I couldn't use it or utilize it for God's glory, but the truth is that the calling that we have received is very explicit in His Word. That's where we should start, to go and make disciples of all nations. You go on, you name it. Those commandments that Jesus gave to us are things that we need to be doing day in and day out. That's our calling. That's our center for what we are doing and who we are for life. Everything else in addition could be our tent making, right? Paul was a tent maker, and that he might have been successful in. He might have been an excellent tent maker. Jesus was probably an excellent carpenter, but that's not who they were. That's just what they did. And so for me, my goal is that I could inspire, which another term for inspire is breathe life into a next generation of people. And I recently saw a stat in the last couple years that said that my generation is the loneliest generation in history. And when I hear that, I'm like, how is that even possible? Because if you look up and down the rows of technology that we have today, I mean, us right now talking face to face over the internet. It's a miracle, right? And we can do that at any given time. I could call my dad up in Idaho right now. I'm in Indianapolis. I could FaceTime him. He could tell me what's going on with his day. So why are we so lonely? We have social media. We have all these influences that are constantly just flooding our mind with information and connection. And why does it leave a hole in our hearts? And I think this comes from, I'm gonna give you a couple quotes, and I'm gonna butcher both of them, but you guys can go do your research in the meantime. One of them is from C.S. Lewis. Now, C.S. Lewis said that if you want to avoid God, avoid boredom. And the next point is from Ecclesiastes, talking about we have a God-sized hole in our heart. We have eternity put in our heart. And I think the reality is that we live in an era in this world where we're filling that God-sized hole, that boredom that C.S. Lewis might be talking about, with all these influences that are pulling us and inspiring us in the wrong direction. So my goal, again, is to inspire, to breathe life into through truth, and encourage people to seek more in faith, in life, and how they use their own platforms, how they gain significance. I mean, you name it. Seek more is a great term to utilize, and this is a campaign that we're actually trying to build right now, is seek more. And a past campaign that we've had is for His glory, based off the John 3:30 verse that says, "He must increase, but I must decrease." And so that's been my philosophy in life, is realizing that the significance that I have is not tied to my success on the track. It can help. Winning races does help at different times, and it can grow the platform, but that doesn't change who I am. And honestly, being married has made me realize that. Scotty Scheffler, we might know, he's a PGA player, number one in the world. And I remember watching a documentary that he was in, and he talked about when he goes home, it doesn't matter whether he won on the course or he lost on the course. He gets treated the same way by his family and his wife, and they're going to encourage him and hold him accountable to in any of those directions as they would in any success or loss. And so I got to see that in my own marriage of how Molly pushes me in my faith as well as in who I am, my identity, to be tied to something more than just the racing. It also is it's a foundational stamp on Stingray. She didn't marry you because you're a race car driver, because you're worse when you're a race car driver as a husband, right? Because I have a helmet on, I'm focused on driving. It's kind of selfish, but it's what I do. And so
Right.
she loves me because of what's internal. And it's been a blessing to kind of have that experience in the last year where I'm going through all these different changes. But my foundation is still growing and hopefully impacting others' lives.
Yeah. Well, I know, impact is so important to you, and that's really led to this cool partnership you're doing this year with Freedom Service Dogs, who are sponsoring your car. And I know a little bit about them. I know they help pair veterans and people with disabilities with service dogs, but talk about how that came about and what's exciting about working with them.
Freedom Service Dogs has been in partnership with an organization called Good Heart Animal Health Centers, who's been one of our partners for several years now. And so that's kind
Hmm.
of how this relationship has developed. But Freedom Service Dogs is a very, very cool organization because anyone knows that dogs are man's best friend, right? Well, these
Right.
dogs are not just best friends, they're more than that. Because these dogs, they offer comfort like a best friend would, but they also give their companions some freedoms that they might not otherwise have. And a lot of times people don't realize this. They might qualify for one of these dogs for free. And so if there's an organization, like let's say there's a local fire department that needs a dog to do some service oriented things, whether it's PTSD related, as firemen going into fires, there might be some PTSD left over from these accidents, wherever else it might be. Or if someone has a disability, something as simple as being able to being unable to pick up credit cards, a dog can help do that. Or they can, like we heard a story the other day of a veteran uh, that is too afraid to go in their house at night
Hmm.
because they have PTSD. And so the dog that they have will go in the house ahead of them, flip all the lights on in the house, and then signal to them that it's okay and safe for them to come inside. And so it's just things
Mhm.
like that that allows them to have that freedom to go through the everyday life with some extra comfort and peace. Um, and everyone deserves a best friend like these guys because through their extensive training processes, people can get so much more from life. They can live a life that's much fuller. So it's been cool for me because I love dogs, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's a very cool organization. It's not just throwing a dog on the side of the car and saying, "I love dogs." It's I love the impact that dogs have, right? And through this organization, we get to see that.
Yeah. Well, we I think it's really cool, and I was really
Incredible.
interested in how they train them for specific
Mhm.
to solve specific problems,
Yes.
right? Which is, not my mental picture of service dogs, right? I figured they all went through kind of the same, you know, program, and then they get assigned to people as needed, but to know that they personalize these dogs for each individual's needs, I thought was really cool.
It is very cool. It's nice to know that they're caring enough to give you the dog that you need. And quite honestly, I don't need the freedom that some of these dogs provide. I need a companion dog at times, a friend, and they can
Yeah.
do that too. They got every tier that you need as an individual to qualify for one of these dogs. So it's pretty cool to see that program in full force, not just on the human side, but also on the dog side.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, it's an amazing cause and it's helping um, people who, I mean, like you said, everybody deserves to have a friend, but um, these people have sacrificed a lot for us and we need to be supporting them.
Yeah. Well, and I
Absolutely.
I hate questions like this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway because I feel like
That's a great way to,
yeah.
all
I
right,
was
let's
thinking
stick to
about
this.
what do you see in the next few years? Maybe Stingray is approaching 30, what would you like to be doing? What's your vision for it? I hate that, of course, because I feel like predicting the future, it's so impossible. But what's in your mind for the next few years for you?
Great question. 30 is a long ways away for me right now, I think, in my youth,
Don't rub it
23 years
in.
old.
Don't rub it
Yeah.
in, Stingray. Don't rub it in.
So I'm not there yet for the 30, but I'm thinking maybe 25, 26. I can kind of see what's up the road, if you will. And I think what's next for me is trying to grow into who I am as an influencer, a inspirer, if you will.
Mhm.
I don't know what that looks like yet, but I've seen different avenues open up at different times, open doors, closed doors, all that in between. So, just trying to be obedient in those, as well as staying married. I've
Mhm.
gotten to see it done right and done wrong, and so I'm going to lean towards the right as much as I can. Put a lot of work into that because I know Molly is, and this is fun for me to say, but she's going to be the most consistent thing I have in my life for the rest of my life. So I
Yeah.
want to make sure that that's foundational and who I'm trying to become. But for the near future, I just want to keep racing. I want to keep loving what I do. And, I think it's easy when you're in a high competitive sport like this, you can get burnout. You can kind of
Yeah.
lose sight of why you do what you do. And so having fun is a big part of that. So I
Mhm.
just want to commit to having fun for as long as I can. And hopefully success comes along the way with that.
Well, I'm sure it wasn't just Momager who contributed to that, but I can say confidently, Stingray, you are wise beyond your years, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, get that marriage right. We've been
Yes.
happily married for 20 years, going on 21. And when that is working, the everything else is so much better. And when it's not working, it doesn't matter if work is going great or other things are great in your life. When your marriage isn't working, it's really disruptive. And so prioritizing that's been key for us, I know. So
Mhm.
so that's exciting. And I'm excited. We're coming when this episode comes out, we'll be just a few weeks from the Indy 500. And I'm excited to see you have a really great race there in the biggest forum. Before we end, we wanted to do our lightning round. All right, here we go. So we're going to try to do 90 seconds each for 3 questions, but there's no buzzer. Maybe we should get one, but there's no buzzer. So, so 90 seconds. What's a legacy you'd like to leave behind from your time as a racer?
Specifically from my time as a racer, well, hopefully some wins that people can look at and say that was pretty impressive. But like I said, more than that, the significance that comes from using this career as a platform, I think, is what I want to lean into. Maybe being a public speaker one day, having impact on the next generation. Again, being an inspirer. That's a legacy I want to leave. And even more than that, I mean, I could see myself being a racing dad at some point in the future. Now, I'm gonna have to do a lot of training in that sense to have the patience to work with someone other than myself because I have a hard enough time with myself. But that would be pretty cool to see a next generation of young Idahoan drivers coming up through the ranks, whether that's my own or someone else.
That would be cool to pass that on to someone else. Such a unique skill set and career. Um, Next one, 90 seconds on something that's off topic, but it's kind of captured your interest lately. Maybe it's a non-racing hobby, sports team you're a big fan of, something like that that's really captured your attention recently.
Okay, I'm gonna do the best I can here to think of something that's interesting as well as engaging. Actually, so I recently got back from a trip with Molly from England. And we went over there as part of my job. There's a driver coach over there that I worked with for a couple of days, and the rest of the time was just spent traveling. And I haven't done that in quite some time. So it was kind of good to get out and experience the world outside of my own little bubble here in Indianapolis. But kind of remind myself of how small we really are in this big world. But that was really fun. So I think that traveling is kind of on my list of things to do during this next off season, just to grow my perspective and have some more experiences in life and some more just knowledge of the world. I think that it's important to have a grander view of who we are through the paradigm we see the world through. And so the off season will probably hold a few more trips, not to England, but maybe a couple other places. Now, in addition to all that, I've been getting into running a little bit more, which I
Oh.
hate. I hate to admit that. But my wife is a runner. She ran in college. She actually is planning to run the Chicago Marathon later this year. She ran Boston last
Oh,
year. And
that's
so
amazing.
I'm teasing with the idea of being a half marathon runner later in the
Hmm.
year. So hopefully that was under 90 seconds, but that's kind of where my brain's at these days.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, that endurance will serve you. It will.
Well,
It
and of
will.
course we have the Indianapolis mini marathon, right? Which is a half marathon that happens right near the race. It might be a little too close to the race for your comfort. But but you can always do that one, I suppose. Our last question, I'm going to ask you a little differently than I've asked some others. I want you to make your best 90-second pitch for anyone who's thinking about becoming a professional race car driver. Why should they do it?
Okay, we're gonna keep this really, really short. You shouldn't. Period.
I love it.
No,
I
okay,
love
we'll
it.
cut that. We'll cut that if you
Oh
want.
no,
We're
that's
keeping that in.
staying in.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
staying in. I love it.
Okay, here's my 90-second pitch. Here we go. If you're a young aspiring race car driver, it takes a lot of work, dedication, and a lot of courage to become an IndyCar
Mm.
driver. So start today. There is something called the 10,000 hour rule that talks about spending 10,000 hours doing whatever it is in order to become great at it. Well, I'm here to tell you that that is not a complete truth. The complete truth is it takes a range of experiences in order to become a great IndyCar driver. So my pitch to you is do the hard work on and off the racetrack. Get the seat time as much as you can, but become an engineer, become a marketer, become a business ambassador. When you do those things, when you become the full package, you will have a great career because you're a fully equipped athlete to go be more than just the athlete. It's one of the best experiences you can have in your life being a race car driver, driving 240 plus miles an hour, competing with some of the best drivers in the world across the world in an era of motorsports that is safe as well as inspiring as well as dangerous. All of those things lean into being a rocket ship driver, if you will. These cars are awesome to drive, and I'd recommend it to anyone if you have the opportunity. Step foot into a race car, get the taste today, and put the work in.
Well done.
Yes. Yes, well done. Well, thank you so much, Stingray, for joining our show. And for anybody who wants to get in touch with Stingray or learn more about him, hit him up at www.stingrayrobb.com.
Yes, we thank you so much. It's been a real treat. And I think you are, I can see the gift that you have. And I just love you sharing your calling and what God's put on your heart. So thank you for that transparency. And I know I'm inspired today. So
too.
this has been a big.
Maybe not inspired to become a race car driver.
Oh, man. I like speed. I have the need for speed. I
Yes.
could enjoy some of that. No, but thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you tuning in, we thank you for your time. We know you have a lot of choices. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future. Until next time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Liberty Spenders Podcast. If you're a business owner, we hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights on how to grow your business.
If you enjoyed the show, do us a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us reach more entrepreneurs and leaders like you who are ready to make an impact.
And write something flattering, because I read them all. Don't forget to grab your copy of Liberty Spenders too, available now on Amazon and at libertyspenders.com. It's packed with proven strategies to help you reach the 76.5 million consumers who are looking for brands that share their values.
We'll see you next time as we continue exploring how to grow your business with purpose and conviction.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode and the one after that.